Hello, good evening, welcome to History on Your Doorstep here on Bro Radio with me, Graham Loveluck-Edwards. In tonight's programme, we are going to be talking about the Welsh who built America. And if that phrase has got you frowning at your wireless and asking yourself, what is this idiot talking about today? I think you're going to be surprised by the extent to which Wales and Welsh people contributed to the building of the nation of the United States. Now, there's so much to talk about that I can't possibly handle it all by myself. So I'm delighted to invite our guest today, Chris Lloyd. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you so much for having me, Graham.
Absolute joy to have you here. For those who don't know Chris, he is a filmmaker with a passion for history. I think that's probably is that the apt description, do you say?
Absolutely. I just love this stuff. You know, the best thing about it is history is free and it's for everyone. So, you know, if it's free, it's for me.
Yeah, that's a brilliant philosophy to live by. You can see Chris's content on the History Hit channel, is that right?
That's right, History Hit TV.
And all the social platforms and YouTube and all of the YouTube.
I'm on the TikToks and stuff, so.
Doing the TikTok.
Yeah.
Cool. Right, okay, fantastic. So there we go. So Chris has made a film which kind of inspired this conversation in the first place. So we're going to be talking about that. Also talking about a project you're involved with at the end that people can pop along and get to see. So brilliant to have you. So let's get stuck into this. So what we're going to be talking about here, I'm going to kick off in dubious waters, because there's a lot of misinformation about Wales's contribution to America, as well as a lot of information that isn't commonly in the ether. So I thought a good place to start would be a claim that America was actually discovered and colonised by the Welsh about 500 years before Columbus set foot on the place. And there's a very, very old story. It goes back to the 12th century. And it's about a Prince of Gwynedd called Prince Madoc Ap Owain Gwynedd. And Port Madoc is named after him. And the general gist of the story is that they set sail from Port Madoc, sailed west, disappeared for a couple of years, came back. And when they returned with stories of this new land that they had discovered. With an indigenous people who were welcoming and friendly, and they talked about it in terms as if it was like a new paradise, and that people should go over there and colonize. So a fleet was gathered where all the people who were prepared to start a new life could get on board. They sailed off into the horizon. And that was it. None of them were ever heard of or seen ever again.
Oh boy!
So it ends on a bit of a cliffhanger.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's just a do.
Yeah, yeah.
So we fast forward 500 years, and this is where the story begins to get a bit of traction, because we're talking now 1666. There was a sea captain called Morgan Jones, who was a South Wales man, his ship was floundering just off the coast of Oyster Point in Carolina. Oh. And because the ship was stuck on a rock, there was no point staying on board, because they would eventually all just die. So what they had to do, even though where they were was uncharted territory, they had to take their chances, get to the coast, and try and find a way of moving across country to get to what they would have described as civilization, a place they recognized, right? They were a long way away. When he finally did get to a colonized area, he had a story that during their journey across country, they had been taken prisoner by an indigenous tribe. And while they were held captive, they could hear conversations going on. And one evening they were dragged out one by one. And tied up and put on their knees, and a man stood above them with a club ready to knock them out. And just as they came to Morgan Jones, being the captain, he was going to be first. In terror, he shouted out, "Trigaredd, Trigaredd," Welsh for mercy, mercy. And on hearing the words, the tribesman immediately put down the club and then spoke back to him in Welsh.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
So this story really got some traction in early American sort of civilization. And we'll be talking about, Thomas Jefferson a bit later on, but he became quite obsessed with this story, and to try and find this tribe. Is the story true? No, it's a commonly enough known story. But there's a bit of a political overtone, and the political overtone is, even though this story is supposed to have, well, part one of the story, the Prince Madoc bit, is meant to have happened in 1170. There's no sort of written accounts of it until the 16th century, by which time America has already been discovered. There's also a big political war going on between the English and the Spanish and the French over who has sovereignty of America. And there is a theory that this story was invented to strengthen the English claim to America as a colony, because if it had been discovered 500 years before Columbus, and it was already colonised by Welsh people who were subject to the English crown, that meant it strengthened the English claim. So it's probably a political instrument to try and strengthen the story, but it's nonetheless a good story.
Absolutely. Great marketing spin.
Isn't it? It's just, but it's weird. That is one of the few things that people know about Wales's contribution to America, and it's probably not true. It's just mad. And the other spurious one, I'm going to say spurious, I think this probably could be true, this one, and that is the possibility that America is named after a Welshman. Have you heard this one?
I have, yeah, but
it's quite interesting. I have heard this story before, but not the Welsh connection is only comparatively new to me. So there was an explorer called John Cabot, who was one of the very early explorers. He found Newfoundland, very imaginatively named. We found a new land. What should we call this, guys?
Oh. It's like that early on, there's like lots to choose from, innit? Because lots of the world was undiscovered. So Newfoundland.
Yeah, Newfoundland. Let's call it that.
Oh,
but his expedition was paid for by a really rich Bristol merchant called Roger Americk, hence America. But the Welsh connection is Roger Americk may have been called Roger Americk in Bristol, but his real name was Roger Ap Meurig. So he was a Welshman. He was from Monmouthshire, a little village just on the Welsh side of the border near Simmons Yat.
We'll take it.
We'll have it.
We'll have it.
We'll have that claim. That's now ours. It's official.
Perfect.
So we've got these sort of early legends, these early kind of stories, but what I can't get over is if you park them and just talk about the reality, there's so much.
Absolutely.
I mean, you've looked into this obviously for your filming. I mean, what inspired you to start looking in the first place?
Well, it's the kind of thing that just finds you. It found me. So I love, like, I always think about Wales's relationship with America, when our very own Charlotte Church went there as a kid to do some singing or whatever she does, and she met the president, President Bush, and she says, "Where are you from?" And she said, "Wales." And then he replied, "Which state is that in?" And I was like, that kind of naivety of, like, I kind of love that, and it speaks volumes. But like, there's so many links with America with Wales, and like I said, these things just happen. Like something we're going to talk about a bit later, stuff that's on your doorstep.
Oh, yeah.
You just have to lift the stone, and it's all the stuff's there.
A great plug for the show.
Yeah.
History in your doorstep.
Yeah, there we are.
But it's very interesting what you just said about the Charlotte Church thing, because there is an absolute inextricable link between what you just described there and why it is we don't know so much about Wales's involvement in America. And I was watching a podcast the other day, and it was nothing to do with history. It was one of these marketing gurus, a chap called Rory Sutherland, and he was basically asked, why is it that you travel anywhere in the world, but Ireland and Scotland and England, you get this absolutely immediate recognition. So if you and I were travelling with an Irish friend, for example, and we could be anywhere in the world, and they say to the Irish friend, "Where are you from then?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm from Ireland." They go, "Oh yeah, Ireland, I've heard of that. Yeah, know all about shamrocks, and I know all about Guinness and U2, and you get that rapport straight away." But when they come to you and say, "Where are you from?" and you say Wales, there's this quizzical moment when they go, "What's Wales? Where's that?" First of all, do you recognise that? Have you experienced that?
Oh, many times. And I think it's a really good, when I'm far away, when asked where I'm from, I make a point of saying Wales, to educate and to be able to showcase it. And, education. You know, people don't know these things inherently, like for whatever reason. But you know, it's our job to to change that.
Ambassadors.
Innit? Yeah, ambassadors. Exactly that. Yeah.
Well, I think it's very telling that when Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds made the Netflix documentary about Welcome to Wrexham, which, by the way, has done more to raise recognition of Wales than anything done by any institution.
Absolutely. Yeah. Who knew?
But I don't know. Did you watch it? Did you?
I watched some of it. Yeah.
Well, very first, I think it was the very first episode that went out. The majority of that episode was just explaining what Wales is and where Wales is and why it's different from England and a bit about the history. And you know, these people at Netflix, they're not idiots. They wouldn't have done that on a whim. They'd have had focus groups. They'd have had data telling them, guys, when you make this documentary, we think it's a great idea, but
no one knows where it is.
No one knows where it is. Make sure before you get into the meat of the story that you spend some time telling people, you know, what Wales is. And there's a couple of, and we've got to take out of the equation any country whose national sport is rugby, because that's all. The South Africans, the Australians, they know where Wales is. Take them out of the equation, and that's more what we're talking about. And I'm coming back to this, to when this question was asked to Rory Sutherland, who, by the way, is also Welsh. He's from Monmouth. And his answer was, and this comes right into what we're talking about, why it is that people aren't as aware of Wales's contribution to America as they should be. It's to do with how the immigrants behaved when they arrived on American shores. So when the Irish arrived in America, they had absolutely no intention of being Irish. They wanted to... sorry, I've said that wrong. When they arrived, they had no intention of becoming American. They were determined to stay Irish. So they stayed living in Irish communities, going to Irish churches, drinking in Irish bars, celebrating St. Patrick's Day by turning rivers green in Boston and Chicago and wherever they settled. And it still goes on now. And what they did by doing that was they created a new brand, which isn't Irish, which isn't Ireland, it's American Irish. And it's different from Irish. And the biggest bit of proof I have that it's different from proper Irish is in Ireland, throughout history, you've got a lot of division drawn along sectarian lines, a lot of conflict and paramilitary organisations and things like that. You know, the two sides of that conflict, even though they're better these days than they used to be, still a lot of tension there. But when you go to America and you see this, people wandering around with shamrocks and celebrating St. Patrick's Day, even the descendants of Unionists, so people on the other side of the fence who are loyal to the United Kingdom, even their descendants are now part of this brand. They celebrate St. Patrick's Day, they wear green T-shirts and all of this, because in America these divides are meaningless. They don't matter anymore. And that kind of just goes to prove how false this is and how different it and removed it is from Ireland. Now the Welsh, totally different. When the Welsh went to America, it might have changed in later history, but I'm talking about the early days. They took the thought that, look, we've gone to the trouble of travelling halfway around the world to start a new life. So we want to be Americans. That's why we've done this. So we want to integrate ourselves fully into American society. We want to call ourselves Americans. And that is the key difference between those two. And that is the key difference why so little of what goes on in American history as being Welsh is not recognised. It's also why, because the worldview of pretty much everything is driven by the American view of pretty much everything, that's why our brand recognition, if you like, around the world is just not as good as the Irish or the Scottish. It's because we're just too nice.
Yeah, we're so good, and that speaks volumes again about Welsh being able to adapt to situations, adapt to whatever, just to make things work. And I love that.
Yeah. Have you lived outside of Wales any period of your life?
I've worked for long periods outside of Wales, but actually I was born in Birmingham.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, but
there's an example.
Yeah, but that is quite the example. But and it's always great to, I don't know, it's not something you're embarrassed about being Welsh, but like you don't, we're not kind of brought up to stand out, are we? We're not.
Well, we don't. What we don't. I've got my own. I lived in London for a fair few years. My first job was in London, and when I moved to London, in my head I was a Welshman, obviously.
Yeah.
But I was now a Londoner because I was living in London.
Exactly.
And I had Welsh friends, but not because I sought them out and I went to Welsh clubs. They just happened to be Welsh.
Yeah.
So they, like me, were
We're
in
everywhere.
London, and they were Londoners. And amongst, we had South Africans, Australians, people all, it's a bit of a melting pot, as America would have been, in those early days. So, and we did London things, like discussed the quickest way of getting to places.
Going to Pret.
And house prices.
Yeah.
Pret.
Yeah.
I mean, so I totally get that. I think, well, yeah, when I moved away, I wasn't wandering around London with a red T-shirt with a dragon on it constantly. I was, so
Adapting.
I can see how that is possibly part of the Welsh psyche and how it did what it did. So yeah, in terms of the truth behind our contribution, it was massive, but it's not so widely recognised. And what we're going to be talking about in part 2, because I'm going to take a short break now, we're going to be talking about, from the very earliest days, what that contribution was. Because I've been teasing you a lot by saying it was substantial, but we're going to get right into the nitty-gritty of it. So don't go anywhere. Come back straight after these words. Hello, welcome back to part 2 of History on Your Doorstep here on Bro Radio with me, Graham Loveluck-Edwards, and my special guest, Chris Lloyd. We've been talking about the Welsh who built America, and it may sound like a rather grand title, but ladies and gentlemen, you're about to find out the truth. And can you handle it, is the question. Because our contribution to the building of America, in those early days in particular, is quite mind-blowing. For example, not too much of a spoiler, of the first 6 presidents of the United States, the only one who wasn't Welsh was George Washington.
It's crazy.
All of the others. I mean, if you're looking for an indicator that a nation has a big contribution to the founding of a new nation, its first 6, let me say that again, the first 6 leaders of the United States, apart from George Washington, which by the way is the only one whose name everyone remembers, were Welsh. So we're going to talk about how that came about. Now, obviously, there was a long period of history when America was a colony divided by various European powers. That all started to change in the 18th century when there was a movement, particularly in the British colonies, to get rid of what they called the tyranny of the British. And that led to a revolution. And there's one man that you've been looking into, Chris, who was absolutely pivotal in the American Revolution and in the philosophy that was meant to drive. Tell us a bit about him.
So I grew up in the Garw Valley, and a name popped up there quite a lot on street signs and community centres, but I didn't really know who that guy was, and that name is Richard Price. So he was born in 1723 on a farm overlooking a small village in Llandaff. And he kind of went on to kind of shape the world in a lot of ways. Yeah. A very clever fella. The posh name for that is a polymath. He was an expert on a lot of things. So at the age of 15, I want to say, or 17, he left to live in London, and that's where he took his Welsh ideals and just helped to shape the world.
Yeah.
Richard Price too. And also, when I said what was Richard Price to people, when I was researching this documentary, they would say it's a building merchant.
Oh yes,
that's Robert Price.
I had thought
but you're not alone. It's
yeah.
This is kind of something that's designed to trip you up a bit.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So what did you do in America then? What was his involvement in the American Revolution?
This guy from Llandaff was great friends with Benjamin Franklin. The guy, what's he on, the $100 note? So, he's got high acclaim, this guy, Benjamin Franklin, and he's good buddies with somebody from Llandaff, which sounds madness. Benjamin Franklin was also a polymath, a very clever man, and they never met in person, but they were very good friends and communicated via letter writing. And yeah, like I said, Richard Price and his links to America is what he's commonly known for. And he was friends with other leaders of the American Revolution, and Richard Price's advice helped to shape the US Constitution.
Wow.
Which is crazy, isn't it?
Absolutely mad.
And this guy's
was
not
he
known.
Advising on sort of direction and policy and things like that, or what sort of things did he push?
Finance and policy and the revolution. He was he was a man of faith, and his faith interlinked with his ideals as human, and You know, one of the things that I love telling is like Richard Price in 1700s helped to develop AI we know today, and that, you know, like he helped create the template for like insurance, which is protecting people, and his entire scope was to protect and give people a choice. And that's what a lot of the Constitution is, isn't it? You know, giving guidelines and helping people to shape what they've got using their own choices and ideas. And this tyranny you speak of with the monarchy, that's what the revolutions are, isn't it? You know, they want to push these guys out who's making decisions for people, and informed decisions. And
and it takes a lot for a people to rise up. I mean,
absolutely.
Things are tough now, but no one's talking about revolution.
No, wait, not yet.
Not
let's
yet.
make it happen, Graham.
Give it a week. Yeah, maybe this program is a catalyst.
Let's do it, yeah. My God, can't have that on my conscience.
So, you know, things must have been pretty bad.
Yeah.
And also, it's not just about things being bad, it's also about having some really strong leaders to whip up, you know, the cause. And he was part of that. He was involved with saying, with painting the picture of what you should be fighting for. What would be better? You know, what would you rather have than you have now? Surely it's this.
Yeah.
So he's a visionary.
Absolutely,
absolutely incredible.
So yeah, he was known. Richard Price was known as the Apostle of Liberty by his supporters, and a radical by other people who opposed him, a traitor to the monarchy, because in, you know, the revolution was all about getting those guys out, to give the people a choice to make their own choices. And he kind of he carried the torch for that. Like, this guy from Llangayna.
I know, he's just not part of our psyche at all.
He's
not commonly spoken about. He's not. His name isn't on the tip of your tongue. Even I, and you know, I spend most of my life researching history, talking about history. Even I got him confused with another figure from Welsh history straight away. So, you know, it's a common. But it's mad when you consider what he did and what his ideas led to. And it's interesting you mentioned he was a man of faith, because that's another reason why the Welsh were quite keen to integrate. And in slightly late history, so in the 19th century, when movements like the Welsh Nonconformist Chapel movement came about, people who went over to America in that period took that with them, and there were Welsh chapels. And there was a little bit more of the Welsh identity thing in that intake. Frank Lloyd Wright, for example, his family were from West Wales, and he sort of his first projects were building unitary chapels in America, and he called his house Taliesin. So he never and there's a little dragon on the sign.
Nice.
When you go in. So he was part of an intake that were much more pro-Welsh.
Yeah.
But the earlier ones, most of them are Quakers or Presbyterian, and they saw going to America as a way of creating a Quaker Presbyterian state, rather than a place to take Welshness and hold on to your Welshness. So his faith very much would have endeared him to some of the people who were the movers and the shakers of the time, which is pretty extraordinary. When it comes to the crowning glory of the revolution, you know, when you can say the revolution was won, was when the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776. Now, there was a massive Welsh contribution to that. Again, it's one of these things that I sometimes find being overstated. So there's an organisation called the Welsh Society of Philadelphia, and they claim that 16 of the 56 signatories, so well over a quarter, were Welsh. I've looked into this, and I think they've over-egged it.
Embellished it a little bit.
I mean, there were a lot. But for example, they said that John Morton, William Hooper, Francis Hopkins, James Smith, George Clymer. I can't find any evidence that any of those were Welsh. However, there's quite a few that were. So we've got all of them bar one were descended from Welsh, but no more than one or two generations. So you got William Williams, who was a priest. I mean, a lot of these people were religious. He was a Harvard graduate, a priest, and he was a congressman for 30 years. Francis Lewis. Now, Francis Lewis is quite an interesting one, because he was a very pro-monarchy. He was. They're called the Tories in those days, back in America as well. So he was a Tory, a New York Tory, who signed the declaration despite the fact in his earlier life he'd been pro-monarchy, and the English were so cross about this that when they sacked Long Island, they destroyed his home.
Oh, wow.
So they were very cross.
One of the biggest opposers to Richard Price was William Burke, and he laid the foundation of the Conservative Party today, which again speaks volumes.
All right, say no more. But he was the only one who was actually born in Wales. He was born in Llandaff, which what we like on the show is a tenuous local link. It's a tenuous local link. And he's definitely born in Llandaff. Is not very far away. Joseph Hughes was Welsh and again a Quaker. George Reed, he initially voted against he didn't. So when the vote was taken, he voted against independence, but nonetheless ended up signing. Then we've got John Penn, who was again family initially from the Bristol area, but descended from Penn, which used to be just outside Newport. Now the Penns were here's another example of how influential the Welsh were. So have you ever heard of a place called Pensylvania?
Yeah, and also
there's one nearby.
Yeah, one nearby.
Same family.
And in Porthcawl, there's Pennsylvania Drive and stuff.
Yeah, well, the I hadn't thought of that. That's quite right.
Yeah.
I had not thought of that connection. I didn't think of Porthcawl. Well, the Penns owned a massive estate which basically ran through the area between Bristol and Bath and up into sort of Gloucestershire, South Gloucestershire, all around there. That was their estate. They were a really, really wealthy family.
My brother lives in Bath, and I passed through Pennsylvania.
Well, there we go. Because I've often wondered, why is it called Pennsylvania?
Which is a terrible sat-nav situation. I've just gone halfway around the world.
But yeah, it's because of them. But yeah, from the Penn bit of the name comes from Penn near Newport.
Wow.
So we've got other priests like Owain Gwynedd, William Floyd, definitely Welsh. He was another one who the English hated. And when they sacked New York, they turned his home into a barracks. So when he got his house back, it was in a terrible state. Who else have we got? So we got Stephen Hopkins, who was a very, very vocal opponent to the royal family. Lewis Morris, who was from Tintern, and of course Thomas Jefferson is the one everyone remembers. He was the one who, for whatever reason, made more of a play of the fact that he was Welsh. But he was the third president of the United States, born in a family plantation, and his son ended up being one of the most vocal opponents to slavery. So influential. So I mean, that's quite an alumni, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Of people who signed the Declaration of Independence. So many of them from Wales.
And even the names, Hopkins and Williams and stuff, synonymous with Wales and the Welsh.
It couldn't come from anywhere else. And it goes on. I mean, when I mentioned, I gave you a little headline at the start of part 2. And that is the number of early presidents who are Welsh. So we know the first president is George Washington. That's the one everyone remembers. Second president was John Adams. His family were from Pembrokeshire. Thomas Jefferson, we've talked about. His family from Eryri, or Snowdon, depending on your leaning. James Madison, Welsh, but we don't know where from exactly. James Monroe, John Quincy Adams was the 6th. And William Henry Harrison, who was the 9th, but I've only mentioned him because he was the first president ever to die in office. He was only president for 9 days.
Oh, bless him.
But he still counts.
Yeah, he still counts. Did his bit.
Isn't that extraordinary? We're talking about the early days of a fledgling nation, and so many of the movers and the shakers, the people who moulded the direction the country was going to take, the people who voted for its independence, the people who signed the document that made it independent, and then the people who led that nation in its early years, predominantly Welsh.
And we haven't taken credit for that, which says a lot again about us Welsh.
Because we don't know. It's not commonly. I had to dig pretty deep to find something.
Well, even at the time, we're not laying claim to this. We're just doing our bit.
Yeah.
Carrying on.
Yeah. Carrying the torch.
I love that for us.
Do what we have to do. Haven't we done well, Chris?
Haven't we done well?
Proud of us. So we've just talked there quite a lot about politics and politicians and leaders, but of course there's far more to America than that. There are some incredible institutions that we know around the world. I'm going to talk about one just briefly towards the end of this section now, and then we're going to talk about some that will be rather more recognisable in the final part. But the one I'm going to mention briefly, I mentioned Frank Lloyd Wright, who obviously, he designed the Guggenheim. I mean, he's one of the absolute pivotal architects in American history. Some really famous buildings. We've also in America got probably the biggest financial district anywhere in the world around Wall Street. And Wall Street was another area where there was a lot of Welsh influence. But the one that most people will recognise was the reporting on Wall Street. So obviously in Britain, if you buy stocks and shares and you're in that world, you look at the Financial Times Index. In America, you look at the Dow Jones. Dow Jones is the equivalent. And as you can tell from the name Jones. There's a bit of a giveaway. So it's founded by two people called Charles Dow and Edward Jones. Edward Jones is from Merionethshire in Powys. So even the financial institution of America has got a really strong Welsh backing. So look, we're going to take a little break here, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about institutions altogether more familiar. We're going to be talking about Hollywood. Okay, so welcome back. We are now in part 3 of History on Your Doorstep here on Garw Radio, talking about the Welsh who built America. So in part 1, we talked about a story that the Welsh discovered and colonised it, which we're not altogether sure is that accurate. The possibility the whole country is named after a Welshman. I'm going to take that. I think that sounds borderline plausible. Then we talked about the contribution of the Welsh to America becoming a nation at all. We talked about the Revolution, we talked about independence, we talked about the early presidents. And one thing I omitted to mention is that the American flag was designed by a Welsh woman. And this may sound like I'm making stuff up now, but genuinely, a woman called Betsy Ross, please Google it. Betsy Ross was a seamstress, and she was asked by George Washington to come up with a design for a flag. And she took ideas to him, and he had his own ideas. And she said, no, the sort of star you've got in mind isn't right. We need to change it to this sort of star. So she didn't just make the flag. She was really involved in what it should look like, down to quite a granular level. But yeah, her family are from Pembrokeshire. So even the American flag, ladies and gentlemen, is the output of the Welsh. So there's a lot more to it than just politics, and as I alluded to as we finished part 2, I mean, where America holds a lot of soft power around the world, the hard power being in politics, the soft power is in entertainment. And I'm not going to dwell on music for too long, but you can't completely bypass it. There's a lot of very famous musicians who are Welsh. Ivor Novello is the one everyone remembers because there's a plaque outside his house in Canton. So we all know that one. But the Osmonds are descended from a family from Merthyr. Quincy Jones, the man who produced Thriller for Michael Jackson, his family are from Cardiff.
Oh, wow.
Kelly Clarkson, Welsh. Virtually all country and western singers are descended from the Welsh, including Tammy Wynette, who was born Tammy Pugh. Jessica Alba, Miley Cyrus, Kelly Clarkson, Elvis Presley, let us not forget. Elvis is a Welsh saint. There is a church dedicated to St. Elvis in Pembrokeshire, which always rises a smile when people drive past it now. But he was a 5th century Welsh saint, so even Elvis Presley was descended from the Welsh. Hollywood. I mean, I'm going to talk about Hollywood the way you expect me to, but you're going to wait till you hear what Chris has to say about Hollywood. So names you would recognise in Hollywood, taking out the obvious ones, like Anthony Hopkins, and obviously we know he's Welsh. Howard Hughes, the producer, Welsh family. Julia Roberts, Michelle Pfeiffer, Kelly McGillis. Tom Cruise's grandfather was from Flint. Leslie Nielsen, Harold Lloyd, the silent film comedian. He's called Lloyd, isn't he? Tommy Lee, the Motley Crue drummer.
What?
I missed him out of the musicians because he's under Tommy Lee Jones.
Oh, wow.
Bob Hope, Terry Hatcher, Michael Douglas, Bette Davis, Michael Douglas. So when he married Zeta Jones, that must have that's probably how they bonded. Where are you from, love? Swansea.
Such a Welsh thing, isn't it? We're from. Oh, do you know John?
If you know Swan, you must know John.
You know John.
But there's a bigger Welsh claim to Hollywood.
Absolutely is.
What's that one?
Well, we talked about Richard Price. He did a lot for America. He changed that. And he never even went there. But there's a guy that went from Wales to America and lay the land, literally, for the Hollywood we know today. So, Betws, near Bridgend, not too far from where Price was born, actually.
Yeah.
Walkie-talkie distance.
Yeah.
Griffith J. Griffith. I don't know what they were thinking by giving the guy the same name. It
Like
was a William.
We all know it died twice.
Yeah, died twice. Double die. Die or double die. But Griffith Jenkins Griffith, born in Betws in the 1800s. And he left to go to America with no education and no cash. Somehow he managed to made a name for himself and invested in some silver mines. It was like the go-to thing. I wouldn't know where to start if I wanted to invest in silver mines today. But yeah, and the guy got rich, and he bought a ranch, and then built a road all the way to the Pacific coast, which is known today as Sunset Boulevard. And then his land extended, which he donated a lot of it to the city of Los Angeles, which is known as Griffith Park, named after him. And on that land is where the Hollywood sign is.
No way! So that hill that you see with
the Hollywood Hills is from a man from Betws near Bridgend, which is a council estate, and I grew up there.
Wow.
Yeah, and you might know, so like, he had, high acclaim, high position in society, high society guy, because he had a lot of wealth. And then he went on holiday with his wife to Santa Monica, got a bit merry, and shot her in the face. She didn't die from that, got blinded in one eye, disfigured, and he went to jail for 2 years. And upon his release, he tried to repay his debt back to society by offering to build a theatre and an observatory in Griffith Park. But the city of Los Angeles were having none of that because, this guy, he's a bad egg.
Yeah.
But then when Griffith died in 1919, they did what he wanted, and the Greek theatre and the Griffith Observatory, seen in loads of films, like you will know Griffith's Observatory even if you don't know Griffith's Observatory.
Yeah.
And that was built, and there's also a statue of Griffith right outside Griffith's Observatory in Los Angeles. And another Welsh link, this guy, the Hollywood we all know, was from a Welshman, from a council estate near Bridgend.
Well, I watched your film on Griffith J. Griffith, and I knew of the Griffith Observatory, and I always suspected, because there's obviously a lot of Griffiths in Wales, I always suspected he might have been Welsh. Had no idea of the story. But it's just incredible that Hollywood, one of the institutions, and the iconic sign on the Hollywood Hills, that all of that was on the back of the work done of a bloke from a farm in Betws.
Yeah,
it just blows your mind. And I know he was disgraced, which is possibly why he doesn't get the recognition.
It's not a good look, is it?
Yeah,
doing
it's
that,
not a
but
good look.
shooting your missus.
They put a statue up to him in outside the observatory. Does his farm even have a plaque on it? Does anyone?
Nothing.
It's just
nothing
like
in
he's been
Betws.
forgotten since he left Wales. It's like we've washed our hands of him. It's absolutely incredible what he did.
When that film was released, so many people from Betws were like, "I've lived here all my life and I've never heard of that," which is a favourite thing to hear when I make stuff. But there's no plaque, and I wonder, why do you think that is? I think it's a lot because he was disgraced, and he's kind of written out of history, or
I just think people just don't know. I think it's ignorance. I think, as with so many of the names that we read out, maybe not Elvis Presley.
Yeah.
To be fair, I think he's got a bit of recognition.
Yeah.
But
he's done all right, that boy.
The Adams, John Adams and John Quincy Adams. John Adams, the second president of America, was the father of John Quincy Adams. It's the same family. Yeah. So you've got 2 out of the 6 presidents of the United States from the same family, from Pembrokeshire. Can school kids trot that name out as quickly as George Washington in Pembrokeshire? Probably not.
No way, no.
I think we've got this. I don't know. Maybe it's because for so many years, Wales was no more than a region of England. So treated
exactly
no differently from the northeast or the southwest or the Midlands. It was just a region, and it's only really in the last 50 years, to be honest with you, that any effort has been made for it to be any different. I think all of those years of silence where, you know, the important place in Britain is London and everywhere else is an also ran. I think that's had its knock-on effect, that people have not kept alive these incredible histories of people who have shaped the most, but let's not downplay this, they shaped the most powerful nation the world has ever seen. They led it for the best part of the first 50 years of its existence. And no one talks about it. No one knows about it. There's no recognition of it. It's one of these things that when you hear about it, you go, no, we should know.
Yeah, spread the word, kids.
Yeah.
You know, like it's something. We're not a boastful bunch, us Welsh.
No,
but,
we're not a boastful.
and that's got
true.
You know that's turned to our detriment. So let's make it happen.
Yeah, so we've talked about two things in our psyche there that have influenced this. Thing number one is when we leave Wales, we want to integrate and fit into the places that we go to.
Mm-hmm.
So that results in not much brand recognition of Wales. The other thing is we tend to be quite humble about our achievements. And I heard an example of this during the World Cup. There's a great podcast called The Good, the Bad and the Rugby. I don't know if you're
No, I'm not really a sports
all
fan.
right, so The Good, the Bad and the Rugby, it's a great podcast. Obviously, it's all about rugby. And I was watching two Australian internationals being interviewed after Wales had beaten Australia in the World Cup. I'll just say that because that's history, just there. That happened, ladies and gentlemen. Remember that. Forget about the Six Nations we've just had. Just remember we beat Australia. And the reason this is relevant is because they were saying, you don't want to lose to Wales. You know, Wales is an up and down nation as far as rugby goes in recent history. You don't want to be losing to Wales, but at the same time, they are the nicest people to lose to. He said, because if you lose to England, for example, you have chants, you have finger pointing, you have it rubbed in your face. He said, when the Wales beat you, all the fans come up to you after the game and say, next time, you'll have us next time. And that's true. I've done that.
Yeah, like and that, you know, that it's like it's kind of the attitude like we're all in this together.
Yeah.
You know, like
the first thing you do is console your opposition fans.
Yeah, like you know,
just
and
what?
this
What are we
stuff
doing?
is supposed to be fun, you know, and it's a way to make connections across the world.
Yeah.
You know, and I tell you what, we need to stop like shaping the rest of the world. I think it's all right if we lose a couple of rugby matches now and then, you know, like
Well, maybe if we could do what we did in America here, that would be good.
Oh, that would be all right.
Just
Actually, yeah,
create this mega.
just bring it on.
Yeah, just bring these people back, and we'll make Wales great again.
Absolutely.
There's a slogan.
Oh
there
yeah,
somewhere.
absolutely. Well, let's not get any red hats though.
Let's not get there. Oh, Chris, it has been an absolute joy to talk to you today about the Welsh who built America. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've left this programme thinking, well, I never knew that. Because that's all I live for, quite frankly. That is my raison d'etre. We'll be back again in a month's time with another episode of History on Your Doorstep. I haven't decided what that's going to be about just yet, but I'll definitely come up with something. But before I go, I just wanted to give Chris an opportunity to talk about a project that he's currently involved in. So this show's going out on the 28th. Is there still an opportunity for people to see this Price theatre show that's currently touring that you're involved with?
So I'm one of the board of directors for a contemporary Asian theatre who've got a theatre production called Price of Change, which is touring. It's doing a tour right now, and it's ending at the end of April. But this show's got legs. It's being received very well. It's a musical, and it's about Price, his impact, and how that could impact the future of independence in Wales. And check out Contemporary Ancient Theatre's Facebook and socials and stuff, and it'll be back. You know, this is a short South Wales tour, but you know, there's lots of interest. People are loving it, and you know, come, just keep an eye out and come when it tours again.
Brilliant stuff. And my plug, my history walks, they're virtually all sold out. The only one that's not is the one in Barry, which is ridiculous. But there we are. So, if you fancy walking around the historic sites, the Roman remains and the witch's house and where St. Madoc performed his miracles, we'll be going around all of those places with some talks from experts. Get on there, get them booked, because hopefully they will all sell out, but that's coming up in May. So look, until the next time we meet, enjoy your history, have some fun, and we'll see you again. Bye-bye.
Diolch.